God is against the United States. Since the late 90s, or as far back as I can remember, the United States have experienced disasters for the last 2 decades. 9/11, Hurricane Katrina, shootings, housing market crash of 2008, recession, more hurricanes, wildfires, looting, and now COVID-19. This is a contrast to what the pastors are saying today. But instead, I would look around and really ask, are we blessed by God? The answer would be a definite no. So, we are left with two options. Either God does not exist, or God is angry. In my previous video, I talked in more details about how God responds back. The short version is God will push the sins in the mind and it will be uncomfortable. This is what guilty conscience is. It is the push of the sins in the mind. I will leave a link in the description for that video. Now, we are left with God who is against sin and not knowing what his name is. Either he is a generic God that is against sin, Allah, the God of the Jews, or the God of love, Jesus. One can make fun of Allah and the God of love, Jesus, while not sinning, and see that nothing happens. Therefore, God is either a generic God that is against sin, or the God of the Jews. To prove God's specific name, God will speak through a prophet to talk about his/her sins. I have experienced this in person as he answered my specific questions that I asked on my own, and God speaking through the prophet talks about his sins in person. And after God through a prophet talks about his/her sins, he states his name. His name is the I Am, the one who sent Jesus, the Son of God. True prophecy is first person of the prophet yielding to God, and God will only talk through a prophet about his/her sins, the sins of a nation, and disasters in the future. An example of a true prophet yielding to God is the First Person Prophecy channel on YouTube. One of the prophecies talk about a coming plague uploaded on YouTube on September 15th, 2019. This prophecy talks about the Christians crying out to God, many lives being taken, and the lives of the children being taken in the United States. I will leave a link in the description for that video. By contrast, false prophecy is the prophet not yielding to God and instead knows what the next word will be. I believe, or I feel, or I know, shows that the prophet is just making the words up as they go. You can see this all over YouTube or in person where they are not yielding to anything. The prophets in the Bible were yielding to God, so God will talk about his/her sins. Even prophetic dreams are full of psychological bias. Any anxiety or what the person thinks about constantly will show up in dreams. That is why false prophets are having dreams about rapture, the coming of Jesus, or anything else. Even the dreams of the false prophets are not correlated with one another. Again, God will speak through a prophet to talk about his/her sins or the sins of a nation. With the false prophets out of the way, this leads to the discussion of the false pastors. The pastors on YouTube has taught nonsense, and they're not even talking about stopping the sin. Joel Osteen, in his latest video, You're Still Going to Get There, has said in his sermon, will you trust him when you don't see any sign of things improving? I think not, since COVID-19 has claimed over 140,000 deaths in the United States, as people still disregard the severity of the situation we are in right now. Because of COVID-19, Pastor Steven Furtick is now preaching to an almost empty auditorium, which begs the question, if God is the God of love, Jesus, then why would God remove his flock from his church? It is not just Steven Furtick, but other pastors as well. God is not the God of love, Jesus, that they made up where the pastors can pick and choose the verses out of context in the Bible. Instead, God is against sin in the Bible. It is all over the New Testament and the Old Testament. There is no reason to disregard the Old Testament, yet pastors choose to disregard over 1,000 pages of the Bible where God destroyed the Israelites for their sins. Again, God is against sin. It is all over the Bible. Therefore, God is angry about the Christians continuing in sin. He will continue to bring disasters on America as time progresses because of sin. Eventually, the Christians will know that they cannot continue in sin and will confess that sin. Therefore, these disasters will cease in the United States once the Christians stop the sin. In later videos, I will talk more about the verses being used by the pastors to fit this false paradigm of the God of love, Jesus. These verses are continually being taken out of context to mislead the flock. Instead, I would read chapters of the Bible to understand that God, the I Am, is against sin.